Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Global Renaissance Podcast, where we have thoughtful conversations on society and self. As always, I'm your host, Trev Woods. I'm joined today by a special guest, an old friend, Kalala Kiwanuka-Woernle.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm good. It's great to be here. I'm really excited.
I'm glad you came through. So, Kalala is an actor. You know, here, you see the hoodie, it says elevate and then create. We're all about, creativity, self-expression, and, that's what you do. So I want to talk about that and whatever else you want to talk about today, because that's what we're here to do. First and foremost, how are you? How's life?
Life is good. So I was in London for 5 months.
Okay.
So I just got back a week ago.
Oh, Miss International.
I know. Yeah, I was in drama school there.
Okay.
So I went to LAMDA, which is the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts, where I was studying classical acting.
Okay.
So Shakespeare stuff, Jacobean stuff, and literally I put in my application form I don't get Shakespeare. I'm terrified. I need to learn how to do this. And then that's what I did. And I went there and we were just going through the text and I was learning how to analyze stuff and how to speak the language and embody it and just understand what this whole thing is about Shakespeare, because I just never got it. And I was like, do brown people do Shakespeare? It was a whole thing. And
I have thoughts on Shakespeare, but keep going.
Exactly. For me personally, just as a black actor, I just didn't know how I fit into it. And I was like, why is this still relevant? And why do people care about it so much? And then going there and learning about the text and where it all started, it was all about people. It was a way to educate the masses who were illiterate and couldn't read. And so it was this way to just connect upper classes with lower classes and have entertainment and create community, which was really exciting to me because I never really understood it, because I think Shakespeare is very much seen as an elite thing still today. And something that people are I don't understand the language, and it just shuts a lot of people off.
Right.
And you do it in school and it's in this awful context where you're reading it and nobody knows what you're reading. So I went, learned how to do it. I get it now, or get it to the best of your ability. But I appreciate it, and it's exciting to me, and it's something that I want to continue doing, and I want other people to be able to understand it too, because I think it's a great way to just understand the human experience. And
I definitely was one of those kids in high school. I remember my junior year, I took AP Lit, and I beefed with my teacher because I'm like, why are we reading this? This is, I don't.
What did you read? It's okay, but
Macbeth. It was Macbeth. Which, the themes were cool and this and that. I'm like, but I could get all the themes of this from a rap song, so I don't really know why I'm reading this right now. But I think it's meant to be performed rather than read. And so I think that the kind of medium that you use definitely does matter. So you went to learn about Shakespeare. So are there genres? Is that
of Shakespeare?
Or no, just generally when it comes to acting, how do you decide what specific kind of box, not that you want to put yourself in a box, but you get what I'm saying? Are there genres of acting that you kind of fit in? How does that work?
It's funny. Everyone asks that question, and I don't think it's that specific. Every project that you're working on is going to be different. People are always like, oh, do you do drama or do you do comedy? And it's well, everything has a bit
elements
of all of it. If you're creating a good piece of work, it's going to have moments of intense comedy, and then you're going to have moments where it's wow, that's really dramatic and heartbreaking, and that's what a good project is going to do. So I'd like to say that I do a little bit of all of it. I wouldn't be I'm a comedian. I think there's certain people who are really great at that. I think comedy sometimes has moments where those people are definitely experts in their field, but you can have people who are actors who wouldn't be comedians who are I'm funny, or I have good timing. And so oftentimes it has to do with pacing and timing of the work and the script. So I do a mixture of all of it, I guess.
Do you do stage or screen or both?
I do both. I started working professionally about 2 years ago, which sounds so big and whatever, but it's not.
Talk your talk. Talk your talk.
And so
Shoulders all over. Yeah.
And so I started out in stage, but since I was a kid, I've always wanted to be in film and TV. That's kind of been my thing. But they're such different mediums and are really exciting to work in for different reasons. So when you're doing stage, you are trying to replicate things and making sure that you're creating a performance that every single person gets to see the full breadth of the project. And then when you're doing film stuff, you get multiple shots to do the same thing.
Right.
And so there's exciting discoveries that happen then when say we have a scene and then you flub a line and it catches me off guard, and then I like react in a funny way. Sometimes those are the moments that that are improvised that are like people's favorite moments. Like I think everyone talks about in Django when he like slams his hand down on like the glass and it breaks, and then he like that was improvised.
Exactly.
And so there's just beautiful like gems that also come out of doing something over and over again, but also the time frames are completely different. So when you're doing theater, it's usually a month of rehearsal, and then if you're lucky, and then usually performing for about a month. Where with film stuff, or at least the stuff that I've worked on, it's been you get the material, you learn it, you do it that day, on to the next. And so much faster pace. But in all of it, you get to meet incredible people, which is like my favorite part.
Right. So you said since you were a kid, you wanted to be, on TV.
Yes.
In movies.
Yes.
Can we talk about when did you decide acting is what I want to do?
So I went to the Patrick O'Hearn School in Dorchester, and it was an inclusion school. And so we didn't have like PE because there were kids who had physical disabilities and were neurodivergent, and so it wasn't inclusive.
Right.
And so we learned through doing theater, through singing, through dancing, and that was just our normal. Like you learn the ABCs through song.
Gotcha.
You learn whatever else through like dancing. And so performance had very much been a big part of my upbringing, and I enjoyed it. And so I continued doing it through middle school and high school. And then there was the whole question of what are you going to do with your life?
Right.
And I always loved the idea of being an actor, but it was still terrifying. And when you're 18, like, and you have friends who are like, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be a doctor, and you're like, I'm going to be an actor and like make no money. And so like, and people say things to you and it stays with you. I remember saying to people like, I want to be an actor, and someone being like, that's really ambitious, don't you think? And like, that hurts your soul a little bit. You're like, whoa, that's not taking into account like all the work I'm going to put in or whether or not I'm good at it. Like, just like, no, like you should do something else.
Right.
I was thinking about doing conservatories. I was still terrified, so I didn't do the conservatory route for college. And I went to a tiny liberal arts school in Minnesota called McAllister.
That's so crazy.
I know. And I was like, I'm going to California and I'm going to be tan. I'm going to audition and it's going to be lovely and this really beautiful experience. And then McAllister kind of fell in my lap. My college counselor was like, I really think you'd like this school. And I was like, no, I'm like not going to the Midwest. And she was like, you should try it. Like, just think about it. So when I was applying to schools, it was the first one that I heard back from. I went to like one of those students of color weekends that they have where they like recruit you.
Good flyouts. Yep.
Yes. So I did that. And it being Minnesota, it was April. Minnesota had a major snowstorm. And I was stuck there for 5 days, couldn't leave, couldn't get a flight, and was just slowly falling in love with the school and falling in love with the people.
Oh, wow.
And it was just like the best accident that could have happened.
That's so crazy.
And even then, I still didn't know that Minnesota has one of the largest theater scenes in the country, which a lot of people don't know about.
I had no idea.
And there's tons of history with it, too, and a lot of Black theater history. There's this theater called Penumbra Theater, which is where August Wilson did a lot of work, and he's like one of the founders. And so, like, Fences and like Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and those shows were done like on that stage.
Gotcha.
No idea going in.
Right.
It was just one of those things that you slowly find out. When people would ask me, what are you going to major in college? I was like, I'm going to be a theater major and also like media and cultural studies, so that I'm like into a lot of different things. Never took a media and cultural studies class at all.
I respect that a lot.
No, like it never happened. My first class of college was a auditions class that I should not have signed up for also because it wasn't a first year course. Like it was me and this other kid who actually, it's really weird. He's now like an actor too. And he ended up leaving the school and went to the Royal Conservatory of Scotland. And like we both went the Europe route and went to drama school, which is like random. But we were with kids who were juniors and seniors.
So you were in over your head.
Just like in over our head, had done like high school theater. And now we're like with kids who wanted to do this.
Yeah.
And we're years older than us. But it was great because it just meant that we had to like keep up and like just going. And I think that's what you have to do when you're an actor. You just have to keep going. And it's like, can you keep up? So I did that, loved it. Still was a little bit unsure just because fear sets in. It's not cute to be like, I'm going to be an actor until you've like
made it.
Success. And then it's like, oh yeah.
We always believed in you. That's so cool.
No, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I did a show, did the next year, did a show, the pandemic hit. And I was in a show, 12th Night, which is kind of funny, the whole, like, Shakespeare, and really struggling with the show, didn't get it, couldn't learn the lines, and then the pandemic hit. I keep hitting my mic. Pandemic hit, and people like our directors and stuff were like, you need to keep learning your lines because we're going to be back in 2 weeks and we're still going to put on this show and stuff. And I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I really can't. And then obviously everything shut down.
Right.
So I'm back at home in Boston and kind of like, what am I doing? And a lot of the theater classes, I'd done a lot of the performance stuff, thankfully, at the beginning. And so when I got to my junior year, it was a lot of theory and I missed the performance aspect. And I was like, if I can't perform, what can I do to make sure that can compete once I graduate? And do I want to be serious about this? Like, is that what I want to do? So I did this, I don't know what you'd call it. It was sort of like this acting course thing where you kind of learn technique a little bit of what does it mean to be an actor and what do you need to do. And I learned that you need to be singing every day. You need to be, if you want to go musical theater, you need to be dancing every day, running monologues. And you're basically like a business owner. You're just like, please hire me.
Right.
Or like,
you are your product. And
you are your product.
You're forced to sell yourself, right?
And I think that in college, because it was a liberal arts school where people were doing it more casually, learning the business aspect was really necessary. And slowly, because I couldn't do it, I was like, wow, I love this and this is what I want to do. So after doing that program, I then applied to the National Theater Institute at the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center in Connecticut. And I got in, and it was basically like my study away. And I had dreams of going to London and studying in a drama school in London, but it just wasn't the reality because the pandemic was happening.
Yep.
So we're basically in this pod of, how many of us were there? It was either like 34 or 40 of us who were like in this group. And we were there 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, just
Grinding.
go. And what's exciting about that program is it's very much about like becoming a theater maker, right? So you're writing, you're directing, you're acting, you're putting up your own sets, you're figuring out lighting. And it was very much the gritty, like fun part of like, okay, you want to do this? Put it up.
Right.
And so you're writing things down and then you're getting to see people perform it, which is amazing. And you're like, wow, I just wrote that in my room like 2 hours ago. And I just fell in love with it more and more. And it was less about like, how do I do this? But like, how do I figure out every other aspect of my life that I can do this? So I was there for 14 weeks. It was grueling. It was intense. The pandemic is still going on. We were masked the whole time. You don't get breaks. You don't get to like go other places because you can't. You owe it to the ensemble to stay healthy and to not ruin timelines, stuff like that. And then I went back to school the fall of my senior year after not being back at campus since the spring of my sophomore year. And it was kind of just like, oh, I'm back. Hey, everybody. And a lot of my friends stayed in Minnesota and I didn't. And so that was like a wonky experience as well because people had made new relationships and were doing internships and their lives were just different. And so I felt like doing a little bit of catch up of going back into school. But I got back and I had turned 18 at that point, which is a big difference for when you're acting because it means that you're not going under child labor laws anymore. So you can like actually work a lot easier. And so I slowly started doing some commercials. I started doing some modeling stuff and just getting the taste of like, oh, I really like this. Did a bunch of shows, ended up doing a playwriting thesis where I interviewed a bunch of moms about their experience of motherhood and basically created this documentary style of theater, which was super rewarding. Graduated. And right before graduation, so taking it back, so Penumbra, which is the Black theater that I was talking about before, right before I graduated was having auditions for this show. And they were looking for college-age kids to be in the show. And I was like, oh my God, like,
It's perfect.
I can't. And the funny thing is, my first year course, they took us to a bunch of shows around the Twin Cities. And I had seen For Colored Girls at Penumbra as like one of the first shows. And I just remember being in the audience being like, imagine if one day I can like act on that
That's
stage.
a great full circle moment.
Imagine if I could.
Yep.
So I worked really hard on the audition, was really happy with my audition, did it via Zoom, which was super wonky, and then didn't get it.
Dang.
And it was kind of just like, okay. And you just have those moments where you're like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? I just graduated. Like, how do I do this whole thing? And so I panicked and I packed up my whole apartment in Minnesota, sold my bed, sold all my stuff, went back home. And I was home for 4 days. I was out at lunch with my dad and my phone kept going off. And I was like, what is happening? Like, what? And I thought it was like maybe one of my friends or something.
Right.
And it was the production manager from Penumbra. And he called me and he was like, hey, like, what's up? What are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm like back home. He's like, of course you are. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, someone had to drop the show. We'd really love for you to come and do it. And it was just like, what?
Wow.
Like, what?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, like, cool. When do you need me? And he was like, can you fly out tomorrow? And I was like, okay, where am I going to live? Like, what? And they're like, it's fine. Like, we'll pay for the flight. We'll like put you up. You're going to be here. I'm trying to think. I think this was like May. And they were like, we'll be in rehearsals for maybe 3 or 4 more weeks. And then we'd have the run for a couple weeks. And so I was just going to be back in Minnesota for like another month. And I was like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And they were a week and a half into rehearsals. And then I just went. And that was my first professional show.
That's amazing.
It was incredible.
Mm.
I learned so much. And just to get to be with Black actors and in like a Black space as my first like production, it was incredible.
Yeah.
And just the titans that have walked on that stage and the like work that has been, it was amazing.
Nah, that's a amazing story for a couple reasons. I think the first thing you mentioned that when you're telling somebody, what do you want to do? And you tell them like, I want to be an actor.
Exactly.
You sure?
Or they're just like, oh,
I love that
that's
for
so
you.
cute.
It's super patronizing.
They don't take you, which is weird though, because in England, when you tell people that you're an actor, it's very different. It's like, oh, it's recognized as like a craft and like,
Right.
oh, you've gone to drama school and there's some weight to it. Where here, it seems like everyone wants to be an actor and like,
Right.
yeah,
No,
it takes a lot more.
I think the thing with that is, and one of the reasons I like doing my podcast is like, I was always that type of person where in the back of my head, like, I'm a musician. Like, I've been playing drums since I was 3 years old, right? Like, I write music now. But I never thought about taking music seriously because I always heard that, like, you're not going to make no money.
Yes.
But then you realize, especially when you get to a certain point, you realize, like, yo, if you put the work in, the opportunities are there.
Absolutely.
And especially when you have the talent, you have the drive to do it, like, you can achieve what it is. And so props to you for not selling yourself short. But what is the mental space of, like, hearing this and thinking something else?
Yeah.
How do you balance noise versus your own internal feelings and desires?
Yeah. So, to be an actor, in my opinion, and this is like a very wonky thing, you need to have the support of your parents. And like, I owe everything that I have to my parents. They were very much supportive of it throughout and never told me that I couldn't. Right. And it would have taken one of my parents just being like, no, like, let's do something else for me to not have done that. So you need those people who are cheerleaders in your life who are like, go do it. My mom still flies out to every single show I do. It's very cute. But it's like, it means the world to me. And I feel like I owe it to them because of how much they've encouraged me, but also because it makes me happy, you know? And my mom always said to me, like, as long as you're doing the best that you can, like, there's nothing else we can say. And she also says, like, if you're doing what you're supposed to do, the money will come.
Right.
And thankfully for me, like, the money has come, like, in moments. Listen, it is not glamorous. It's not cute. Like, I'm living at home with my parents right now and figuring it out and being like, okay, like, how are we going to pay for this and how are we going to do that? But it's not, like I always say, I don't want to be a struggling artist. It's just not.
Right. It's not the vibe. It's not the vibe.
It's not.
Starving artist, that ain't my style.
But you do, though, like, the things that you have to do.
Right.
And so for me, it was like I was nannying on the side, and that was filling in a different way. And then I would run to rehearsals and auditions and all that stuff. But how do you keep yourself going? I realized early on that I don't think a lot of people do. There'll be moments when it's me who's perfect for a role, and there'll be moments when it's not me. And I realized there are people who can learn lines faster than me. There are people who are taller than me, prettier than me, people who are skinnier than me. Like, there's those things that I can't control. And then there's the things that I can control. And I have a really good work ethic. And that's something that, like, I respond to emails on time. You
better than me because I sure don't.
No, you...
That's like my worst thing. I see an email, like, I'll get back to that.
No, but like a lot of people don't do that. But when you're an actor and you get a casting call, it could make the world of a difference of just responding to an email, and things move so quickly that you just have to be on it at all times. So it was less about being like, oh, like, there's just so many other people, and just being like, what can I do that makes it that I can compete and that people want to remember me and that I'm someone that people want to work with and invest time in. You have to look at it from a business. I think you can't take it personally.
Yeah.
And people say, like, you could go in and a casting director can be like, she looks like my ex-girlfriend. I don't want to be in a room with someone who, you know what and there's just like
That's
things.
super real,
it's
though.
like a thing of, or I just like don't like the way they talk. It reminds me of this kid who used to bully me back in the day, and I just don't want to hear. You know, personality makes a difference, but there will be moments when it's not you. The majority of time, it's not you.
Right.
And then the moments when it is, like, are you doing everything you can so that people want to be in a room with you? And I've been really fortunate to work with a lot of amazing people who have taught me that and have been encouraging. But also, I'm proud of, I don't think people talk about enough, like, being proud of the products that they create. I think when it's stuff, people, it's like fine to talk about. But when it's you and talking about you, people are like, oh, whatever. But like, I like the work that I do because I know that I put a lot of time into it. I'm doing a self-tape and I put hours and hours into learning the lines and making everything perfect and fixing the lighting and all that stuff. So, yeah, it's just making sure that you're controlling everything that you can because the majority of it you can't.
Right. No, I love the point about being proud of the things you produce, especially when it comes from you. Because, like, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I just sit there and scroll through my screen, like, I'm so interesting. I'm so interesting. Like, goodness. I scroll through my podcast page. So, like, I'll go to the bottom, I'll go, whew, and I start scrolling. Oh, okay, this looks good. And it's the development, it's the process. I've always been a big believer in process. Like you said, there's only so much in life that you can control, and most things are like out of your hands. So you have to focus on what you can do and trust the process, because if you continue to do the things you need to do, at some point or another, something gotta give.
Yeah.
Right? And it'll be that one thing that makes all the work worth it.
Absolutely.
So that's a very important point. So as far as some of the productions you've been in, what are your favorites?
Oh, people always ask that question. Different projects for different reasons. So obviously, like, the Penumbra project was amazing just because of the community that I got to be around, and it was my first, like, project. You know, you like hold on to that. I did a show afterwards called The Originalist. There was 3 of us in the cast, but the majority of the play was just me and this older gentleman just going back and forth doing law jargon. So he was playing the character Antonin Scalia, who's a Supreme Court justice.
I know him.
Yes. Very controversial figure, very conservative. And my character was a very liberal law clerk who was pushing back. But the relationship that they have is loosely based on Scalia's relationship with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because they were very close. And though their politics was very different, they would still go to the opera together and saw each other as, like, people. So for me, it could not have been more different of an experience from Penumbra, because Penumbra, I was in the room with Black folks all the time. And then I did this show, and I was the only person of color in the entire building. And I don't think I would have been able to do that project had I had not done Penumbra and, like, been filled in that way of, I am an artist, I'm a Black artist, and how do I keep myself going, and what are the things that I need to do? But I'm so proud of The Originalist because it was one of those moments where I did the audition, got the call back, and then you're getting the script, and you're like, how am I going to memorize all of these lines that is just, like, all, like, laws and policy and just, like, all this stuff?
Yeah, that's the stuff I legit studied in school, and it was actually hard to, like, remember.
There's just so much and, like, little bits and words, and you have to get it correctly because people know this stuff.
Right.
You can't be like, oh, yeah, like, the Fifth Amendment, that's blah, blah, blah. Like, you have to get it completely correct, and that was jarring. But I did it. And I was also with an actor who was 60 years old, right? So or I don't know. I think he was
somewhere around there, but he was significantly older than you.
Significantly older than me, had done a lot of professional things, and the majority of people that I had acted with at that point had been, like, 18 years old.
Right.
So you're going from, like, your
Peer
schoolmates
group,
to, like, a real professional actor who does this and has made a life out of it. But I was really grateful for that because I learned so much from him.
You know what that reminds me of? That class you took your freshman year where you were one of 2 freshmen. Absolutely. So you keep putting yourself in that position where, and that's an important thing, you can't grow if you're comfortable. So sometimes you got to stretch yourself and put yourself around people who are better than you so you can rise up to the occasion.
Absolutely. So, I think a lot of people think that with acting, you reach a point of, like, I've arrived. And I never want to get to that point where I've arrived. There's always more methodology to learn. There's always new ways of thinking about things and practice and technique that, like, makes you better. And every person that you work with is going to, like, teach you something different. Right. And so I'm just really grateful that I got to work with him. And very much, I think, I don't know if he would say the same, but our relationship in the show very much was similar to our relationship where I came in and I'm, like, this little kid who's just like, I love acting. I'm like, nah. And I would have so much energy and he'd be like, calm down.
Yeah.
Like, calm down.
A notch.
let's just like run the lines.
Right.
So yeah, I'm really grateful for that because you never arrive. There's
Right.
always more to learn.
Exactly.
Yeah, I just never want to get to that point.
No, I feel it. Complacency is, I mean, complacency is like the opposite of greatness, right? Like you don't.
But it's very easy to fall into it.
Now, for sure, I think depending on who you are, I feel like I've never been the type, right? There's certain things like, again, I'd play basketball for fun, right? But I still go to the gym every day, be like, all right, hold on, I don't know how to do that. Let me learn that, right? So I think when you have the personality of like, I just want to consistently improve. Again, for me, everything is about process. I have so much fun building and getting better and analyzing, okay, this is what I did. How can I do that better? What can I not do yet? Same thing with drums. I've been playing drums since I was 3 years old. I'm pretty good. Yeah. People hearing me jump like, why don't you like play for it? I'm like, we'll get there. Yeah. But I still sit down and practice like, okay, my left hand's still lagging behind my right hand. So let me work on these different rudiments. So I think when you have the disposition of I always want to get better, it's very easy to just stay there. But most people don't have that disposition. And that's why most people stay complacent. But if you are one of those people who has that disposition, it kind of makes it easier because most people aren't doing what you're doing. Most people aren't doing the work. As far as work goes, how do you memorize like those lines? What is that process like? Because again, for me, like I write songs, and when I go to memorize them, I just do them like a lot. But like the longest song was probably like, I don't know, 64 bars. Yeah. Like that's not that much. You got a whole pack of papers that you got to go through and memorize. Yeah. What's your timeline for memorizing it? How do you do it?
Yeah. It's funny. Everyone's like obsessed with the like memorization thing.
It's you have to understand from like the perspective of someone who doesn't do that. Yeah. We're like, I don't know how the hell you do that.
Yeah.
Like legitimately, how do you do that?
It's basically a muscle, right? So the more you do it, the better you get at it, and your brain just is elastic to the point where you're just like, okay, like give me that, cool. And when I did the program at the Eugene O'Neill, we had so much material that I did a show, or I don't know if it was a show, it was a showing. I did a 15-minute monologue and learned it in 2 days. But it was just because we were churning things out that fast that you just had to. And I don't think that people trust themselves. What we can do as human beings, I think, is so much further than what we allow like what we can push and like go to.
Right, yeah.
I think a lot of people stay in this place of like, it's here when really you can go to here. So for me, when I'm learning lines, I write stuff down. I write down everything. And then in writing it down, I will remember things. And then you just go over it over and over again. And also you try and think about, okay, what am I saying in this moment? And for me, it's your character is saying things for a reason. It's not just like, oh, let's just fill it in. And so for me, being like, why am I saying this right now? Very much helps
you remember it.
Helps me to remember what I'm saying, because then the urgency of that then like comes through. When I'm writing my lines, I'm also writing, oh, why is this being said right now? What is my intention? What am I trying to convey to the other person in that moment?
I find acting so interesting again because I'm all about expression and I can express myself really well. Like you ask me about myself, I love interviews. Yeah. Like, I love job interviews because like I just get to talk about myself. Yeah. So I'm really good at expressing myself. And I've always found acting interesting. Like I went to the summer camp and we would have like improv class, and I used to find taking on characters very, very entertaining. But how do you capture the essence of a character? What is again, it's one thing to memorize the lines, but it's another thing to understand and internalize like who this character is supposed to be and then produce that.
Yeah. Something that I learned while studying Shakespeare is that everything's in the text. So you can learn a lot about the character based on how they talk. Mm-hmm. You're going to get region from that. You're going to get education level. You're going to get pacing. What words do they repeat a lot? And so from there, then you build and build and build. So then you have like a full flushed version. And a lot of it is also just like trying things out. And sometimes things will just come to you. I'm a huge fan of Cicely Tyson, and I read her book. And she was talking about how when she'd work on characters, some things in her bodies would just start happening. Mm-hmm. And she was like, I've never done this before, but now I have this like weird hand gesture that just like keeps happening. And that sometimes happens when you're going through. And sometimes the gesture doesn't stay, but it's the thing that gets you into the character and is your way in. For me, it's what has been written, because that's your guidebook. And then what do you want to bring to it and feel will serve the character. Mm-hmm. And that's the most fun part, is figuring out how the character works. Who do they have connections to? And also, like, when you're trying to create the character, you have to go through the script and be like, what do I say about myself? and what does everyone else say about me?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a pretty good beginning point of figuring out how this person moves through the world.
Gotcha.
And
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Do you have any aspirations to like kind of use the skills you built when you had to like write and produce and do all that? Do you have any aspirations to use those, maybe direct, or you just I'm trying to be in front, you know what I'm saying? I'm trying to put on the show.
Yeah, figuring it out. My favorite creators are like Issa Rae.
Mm-hmm. That's
Um,
Easter egg.
love Issa Rae. I started watching Insecure like again today, and I love it. Issa Rae, Mindy Kaling, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Michaela Cole, and it's cool because they're also like all women.
Yeah.
But I think that's what happens is you literally have to take control of the narrative and be like, okay, like
Right.
this is what we're gonna do. So when people ask me things, I always say that I'm a wannabe playwright and like a wannabe writer. I've been writing since I was a kid and find it to be very therapeutic. But unlike in acting, I have not learned the discipline of recognizing that your first draft is going to be horrible. I want it to be this beautifully written script that is like this will change history. So I think I need to work on leaning into you have to do drafts and put it away and then go. I do love directing. I got to do it at the program and was like, ooh, I really like this. And I was always the kid who, when I was in rehearsals and stuff, I would have opinions about what was happening and be like, oh, if we do like this and this, then that traffic jam wouldn't happen anymore. So then you could like do it.
Right.
And then sometimes the director would be like, oh, we're going to do this now. And I'd be like, oh,
I already thought about that.
I
Yeah.
thought about that. And that's a great feeling. So I'm interested in all of it.
Mm-hmm.
We need more Black folks in all aspects and not just in front of the screen. We need people writing and producing and directing. And sadly, a lot of Black shows have been canceled recently. So yeah, I will do all of it and any of it. But I think because right now I'm focusing on acting and just really getting that part done, then once I have more agency and autonomy over the projects I'm working on, then I'll be able to be like, yeah, I want to produce this and I want to do this.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Like I said, I just asked because I do think, again, I'm the biggest, like, you gotta do shit yourself. You gotta do shit yourself. And like you said, there's a lot of the voices that we hear, and I think, again, I clearly care about narratives, right? And the information in the media that we put out. And we all kind of have this idea that certain voices are elevated and certain voices are suppressed. And so I think it's important as much as we can to elevate suppressed voices. And so you're in a position to do that. What is it like navigating this industry as a Black woman?
It's very interesting. So casting calls is a whole thing. So casting calls is the description of what a character is. And it's really hard because sometimes you'll find projects that you like and then you read the casting call and you're like, oh my God, this is horrifying. The language that's being used is horrifying. And a lot of stuff for Black women is still the best friend. You're not going to be the protagonist. You're not going to have the most fleshed out backstory or anything like that. And so that's funky to navigate. As a Black woman navigating, I've been really fortunate to work on a lot of projects that have been majority people of color. And so I think I'm living in a little bit of a utopia now, like having worked at Penumbra, where it's like all Black folks, like all the time. But it can be difficult when you're doing commercial work or stuff like that, where a lot of things get thrown on you very, very quickly. Things like hair gets really complicated and funky because people don't know what to do with your hair or what the industry deems as like good hair or like cool is stuff that I would never do to my hair and would never treat my hair in that way. So I'll like go in, I'll be like, yeah, my hair looks great. Like I'm really happy. And then someone will come in and just like floof it up. And then it's like,
This looks terrible.
And you just have to go with it. Or like having your makeup done where I've been made a lot lighter. And that's really funky. And then you look at, I know, exactly. And then you're looking at photos and you're like, oh,
yeah.
Okay, now I have zero melanin, thank you. And just losing the agency can be really complicated. And also, people's imaginations aren't that far. So what happens a lot of times is when there's Black characters, it'll say like mixed first and then Black. And so that's very much what they're looking for, which is the whole thing. Or Zendaya types is a thing that you see a lot. Which props to Zendaya. She's making a career for herself and she's definitely paved the way and like done a lot of amazing projects. But I think it's the industry that is just like reinforcing that like we can only go as dark as like light skins
Right.
or mixed folks, and that's not the reality at all.
Right.
And we need to do more to put darker skinned women and darker skinned folks like at the forefront, because when you don't see yourself, like, it just changes
Right.
it.
Yeah. Now, representation does matter, and I think again, even just at this point in my life, just like kind of looking back, and especially like I talk to like I work with a lot of kids, and you just kind of see when you look back and stuff, like, what did I always want to do? Like, I always wanted to play basketball. Why? Because all the cool people I saw play basketball. I always wanted to be a rapper because that was the only thing I saw. Now, fortunately, like, I have very well educated parents, and like the church we went to, like, you see people who kind of are in different walks of life, so I was exposed to that. But for the most part, like, people don't see a whole lot of themselves when they get put in this box, and I think especially with film, Black people tend to fit, they tend to play certain roles, and that's actually rather damaging to young Black people as they're growing up, because they see these things and they internalize them. And so I think that, like you said, that's super important to kind of broaden that representation in the ways in which we portray our Black people in film and media. So that's definitely very, very real. As far as you've gotten to a point, right, in your career where you're moving, right? You're moving.
I
like
guess.
you're moving. The motion is you got some motion. Like we said, a lot of people want to be actors. Mm-hmm. If someone's like super for real about it, like they're like, I want to do this. What would you say? What is necessary? How should they position themselves? What advice can you give?
Yeah, I think this is me being a little bit like, I think you should go to school for it, which I know, and that in and of itself is like a wonky thing because it's very inaccessible in a lot of ways, but slowly a lot of theater schools are now realizing like, oh, we need people of color to tell these stories and we need Black actors, but a lot of people don't know, a lot of information's gatekept, right? Mm-hmm. So Yale has an MFA program that's completely free. So does Brown. I think Juilliard just went free too. So there's opportunities that if you got a BFA, is it a BFA or BA? I think a BA or a BFA. If you have a bachelor's, basically, you can go to these programs and for free you can like go get this actor training, which opens up the rest of the industry to you. So I think that's really important just because a lot of people go in and don't have that technique and then burn out really quickly because they don't know how to take care of themselves. They don't know how to use their body. So that's really necessary, in my opinion. Yeah. For folks who aren't doing that, take acting classes. Mm-hmm. A lot of casting agencies also do classes and just figure out, do I actually like this? But also ask yourself, why do you want to be an actor? Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of moments when you do get to act. And there's a lot more moments when you don't. Right. And what are you doing in those moments when you don't? But if you have that inkling, try it. Why not? Write skits. Put it up on TikTok. Put it up on Instagram.
Social media is a beautiful thing. You have an opportunity to broadcast yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think just create work, but also if you can, like try and get some training under your belt because it does make a difference. When you are looking at films today, not all, but the majority of Black actors who are in movies today are English, and they're getting a lot of stuff because they have that training from drama school, where drama school isn't pushed as much in the States. And so I think it would be great for more Black kids to be in drama school and getting that training so that we can be telling our own stories.
I absolutely love that. Yeah. I absolutely love that. I love this conversation. It was great. Before we wrap, like, just general thoughts on things, like what's happening in your head, what's happening in your world, like what's going on.
Yeah, it's definitely scary coming back from like being at the program because I'm in this weird spot where I'm auditioning for a lot of stuff, and so I'm just like in this waiting of like, okay, am I gonna book like things? Am I gonna book everything? Am I gonna book one thing? Am I gonna book none of it? And then just be like, okay, like now what am I gonna do? But it's exciting. It feels really good. I feel like I've gotten better, which is the best feeling in the world. So yeah, I'm excited and hopeful and just looking forward to seeing what the future holds. What's exciting to me too is I did a podcast when I was a junior in college, very similar to this about like acting, and I hadn't done anything yet. And I was like asked like, what are you thinking about? And I was like, I'm just excited to like go act. And it's like weird because I'm starting to do the stuff that I wanted to do when I was a junior in college. And so I like the idea that in 3 years I'll be like, wow, I was doing even more than I was doing when I was 24, and just keeps going and growing.
Yeah. Well, that's the memory card, but I still have this camera, so we're all good. No, I think that's important. Like, right, one, tracking growth, right? You can really look back and see, like, oh, this is what I did. I've always felt like I feel very connected to like my younger self. I'm like, I have those conversations when I was like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I'm like,
Yes.
what am I gonna be like when I'm older? And now I'm like, this is what you're like. I think it's important to track your growth and just be proud of the things that you've done. So, big salute to you for sharing all your insights on your journey. Where can people connect with you?
I am on Instagram. I think I'm only on Instagram. I don't like do TikTok or
Okay,
like,
what is your Instagram
my
at?
Instagram is at Kalala Christine. I'm also like, if you're really into acting stuff, I have like a backstage too. So if people want to like look at my material, if they want to give me jobs,
We'll link it. We'll put
Yeah,
we'll put
we'll
the
link
link in
it.
the description.
But yeah, mainly Instagram. It's a great
Gotcha.
way to reach out. If people want to talk about acting stuff, I love talking about it. I love just like getting people excited about it because it makes me excited when people are like, I don't know what to do, but I want to do this. And I'm like, here's all this information.
Yep.
So yeah, hit me up.
Dope. As always, y'all know where to find me. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, _Trev Woods, podcast, TikTok, and Instagram at the Global Renaissance Pod. If you're listening to this on an audio platform, I need my 5 stars. I need a review. Like, I'm not even asking for it. Just
Give 'em
do
the
it.
review.
Just do it. Honestly, if you're on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Y'all will catch me on here more. Maybe you'll come back in 3 years.
I
and
know,
talk
it'd be
about
great.
what you've done, and maybe you'll have like an Emmy or something. I hope that's what actors get. I don't
Thank
really
you.
know.
Yes.
But yeah, no, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm really appreciative of you for coming on. I appreciate everybody for listening, and I will catch y'all on the next one.
Thank you for having me.